George Abid, Chief Third Party Officer at Judo Bank. How you going, mate?
Yeah, very well, Mark. How are you?
Good, mate. Long time no talk.
It has been.
Yeah. How you going through lockdown?
Yeah, look, it's been tough. The last one in particular, but I think we'll get through it. And New South Wales is a good example of that, right?
Totally. I guess George, Judo Bank, it's a bank on. To be frank with you, one of the neobanks, but it's been on everybody's lips for a long time. I would say my assessment of what you guys have done at Judo is probably the benchmark of what all the newer banks would have liked to have done. I mean, I don't know how you've done it, but you got out of the blocks fast. You sort of sucked all the oxygen out of the system and got about every dollar that was available to anybody if it was trying to raise money for a new bank. And you did it brilliantly. And obviously, it's not just you. It's your MD who I've interviewed many times. But just as an organisation, did a bloody great job. And you put yourselves in a really strong position. I'd say, from my understanding, you guys have got a massive valuation today too as well. And you're making money and you're doing transactions as opposed to most of the other neobanks. So that's the first thing I want to say. Just congratulate your organisation, what you've done, the way you market yourselves, the way you've raised your money, to market yourselves to your various audience, that is consumers, borrowers, brokers, aggregators like me, consumers, your investors, the regulator. I mean, you've got so many audiences. You guys have done a brilliant job. So I just wanted to say it straight up. Now, but Judo, we're talking to brokers, and this is a broker podcast, and we're talking to brokers. What do you want to tell me about Judo that a broker should know relative to his or her client?
Yeah, look, I think, building the bank from a blank canvas, it was really to show our support back into the market, and our point of difference is around our expertise and our relationship-based model, right? It's leveraging our bankers' experience and empowering them to help sort of small business community with the growth that they're looking for, the growth that they need, and the growth they've been chasing for a long time now.
Yeah, well, my experience with you guys, and I've been talking to Joseph and yourself for a long time, and I think that one of the things that most business borrowers don't understand is that, and you use the word relationship, and if I'm a broker, if I'm putting my client to you guys, I want someone who's going to basically hold the hand and give them a fast decision, give them a fair decision, but most importantly, give them a decision. If I'm the broker, if those two things happen, I take my client off the street. In other words, my client, then I'm no longer at risk for the amount of money, time and effort I put into getting that client. And or if you don't approve it, if it's not going to be a deal that gets approved, then my client's not going to get stuffed around, and my client will appreciate that, and that allows me then to take that client somewhere else.
Exactly, and I think also, Mark, you think about the name Judo and where it comes from, and it's a concept of this sort of judo strategy, as we call it, and like the sport itself, where you use your size and agility to sort of outwit, outsmart sort of larger opponents, being more nimble and fast and be able to make quick decisions, to your point earlier. And arming our bankers with the ability to make those quick decisions is also quite important. And helping customers sort of capitalise on those right opportunities. And opportunities, Mark, they might otherwise have missed, right? And I think time is money, and we all know that. And it's around trying to show the SME community that level of support at a time that they really do need it.
Totally. Well, yeah, because if I got a client walks in my door, I'm a broker, or I'm Yellowbeck Road branch, or whatever the case may be, client walks in my door and says, listen, I want to borrow, $2 million. I'm trying to put that $2 million into my business. I got a house which is unencumbered, or it's worth $10 million, or whatever the case may be. I've got a small debt on it, but the bank doesn't want to lend me the money. My ordinary bank, my transactional bank, doesn't want to lend me the money, or I got to get this money quickly because there's an investment I need to make. I've got to pounce on something, or I need to buy stock because I know, the lockdown's about to cease and I need to get my joint stocked up. And I need $500,000 of that, and I need the other $500,000 of working capital, etc. How, from the beginning, let's say I'm the broker and I contact Judo, what do you do for my client? I mean, just take me through the process a little bit, Georgie. What does my client expect to happen? What do I expect to happen? And what can I tell my client to expect to happen?
A lot of it is centered around the empowerment, or bringing on the bankers that aren't at the mercy of a policy, right? And really using judgment, still having a policy there, no doubt. We always need the policy to help with guardrails in terms of what your lending appetite is, but ultimately you're going to have a banker with a skill set to be able to break down whatever the problem is for a small business, work out what their requirements are, work with the broker to understand that, and then provide a solution, a strategy, to be able to support them through whatever phase they're in. If they're at startup phase, if they're at growth phase, if they're at matured phase or succession planning, it's really just having an educated conversation with someone that actually understands how to lend money to small businesses. And to your point, I think a moment ago, not defaulting to the 4th C, which we call, the collateral, right? And understanding the character first, and then working your way through the capacity and the capital that's in the business, and then only reaching the collateral where and when necessary. So in a roundabout way, just making sure they've got access to the right type of finance professional to support the broker and also to support their customer with their requirements.
Yeah, and that's an important point you made, George. Capacity and capital. So it may be that Judo may take the view that you don't need the collateral. You might say, look, it's better if you got the collateral, but you might say, we don't need the collateral. We're happy just to bank you for the amount of money you need based on character, capacity, and capital. In other words, we know that you can generate enough capital to pass the debt servicing arrangements. We feel comfortable with that amount of capital. We know you have the capacity, your earning income, and we know what your business is, and we've got so many years of transactional information from the accountant or whatever it is, and also character. Can you explain to me, what do you mean by that? Is that reputation? What are you talking about there?
It's a combination of reputation, time in the industry, their understanding of the industry they operate, and how they set their business up. And I think to your point around capital or collateral, capacity, it's around unlocking the value in the balance sheet, in the business. And I think that's what we haven't done well, and we haven't understood until now, I think, is really trying to understand more about the business itself and leaning towards the collateral only when you do see that it needs to prop up those other C's, to your point a moment ago. And I think, if you think about the time now and during COVID, these are the times where we need to do more of that, because you won't see, for example, capacity at the moment because the cash flows have been affected by COVID, right? So you need to be able to see beyond that. You need to say prior to lockdown, and also be able to see beyond lockdown and understand where the business is going to go, what industry they operate in. Is it an industry that's been heavily impacted? Are they going to be able to rebound on the back of these lockdowns, and when we do get back to normality, as we call it, right?
So, George, let's say I'm a broker. What would you say to me that I probably would? I should be talking to my client about. Let's say my client's in. My client's in fashion, and they haven't been able to open their stores. They might be high-end fashion where people actually need to go and try a dress on or outfit on, whatever the case may be. But prior to lockdown, they were doing very well, positively cash flowed, had a good income, let's call it capacity. But right now they've got no capacity. They need to borrow some money. How do I convince? I know you're not head of credit, but how do I convince you? What should I be gearing up? What should I bring in the performances? Be able to show you the performances of what it used to be like. And then do I have to start making a whole lot of assumptions about what it will be like? And where do I expect, the broker, need to talk to my client and say, well, where do you expect demand to come from? Or is that something your relationship people, your guys, your team will actually do? Do you go and dig this stuff out, or you say to my client, you tell me the answer? Or do you say, we'll help you find the answer?
Well, work with them and work with the broker. The broker will pull together an application. They'll understand where the impacts are and where they need the support. You'll lean on the accountant in three-way forecast, or you'll lean on the accountant for updated financials, and then you'll look at what the horizon is for the business, in that how they intend on, as I said earlier, to bounce out of this period that we're in now. And I think that's important too, is to work through a lot of those. It's a very challenging time at the moment for SME business, in particular for those states that have been affected by lockdown, for example. So we've just got to be able to manoeuvre and work out what those pain points are and help support the clients.
Where are you seeing the demand for judo lending coming from now? Let's just talk about geographically. Are you seeing the demand coming out of states that are doing very well with no lockdown, for example, Queensland, or WA, or SA, or Tasmania? Or are you seeing the demand for your lending products coming out of the places where we have had lockdown? And let's say, or is it coming out of the states that just come out of lockdown, like New South Wales, for example? Where are you seeing the demand?
Look, there's always going to be that demand in the bigger states, in New South Wales and Victoria, albeit the short-term impact with lockdown, and it has been offset by WA. We're seeing a spike out of WA when we set that business up over 12 months ago now, or just over 12 months ago. Queensland is still quite buoyant, and we recently did our annual SME Insights report, and part of those and the disparities that we found in funding support across certain states and sectors. And to your point, Queensland came in at the highest rate at 50% of successful lending applications, whereas Victoria, for example, came in at the lowest, which was around 39%. And to your point in around demand, Queensland was the highest in terms of proportion of SMEs in growth phase, which is around 60%. And this is surveyed SME businesses, right? In terms of industries, we found that the construction sector continues to be quite strong and had the highest level of successful applications, which was around 60%. So you can sort of see certain industries, certain states at certain points are doing better than others, but arguably it still is an area that we need to hone in on and focus.
When you say construction, do you mean a company that might be a borrower, might be a civil engineering company, or are you talking about a developer?
Or developer. I'm more the developer.
Developer.
Space, yeah.
Yeah, so developers are the sorts of clients that Judo likes. I mean, that's...
So that's what came out of the report. Apologies.
Okay.
But in terms of it's an area that we don't pursue at the moment is construction and development. That's just a point in terms of what came back from the SME community and what we're seeing happening at the moment in terms of those disparities between states and industries. But large.
Where's your sweet spot now, George? Where's...
Yeah, it's in that sort of trading business space, acquisition finance.
For example, acquisition, what?
Like looking to buy
I don't know.
Business, if they're looking to expand their business, working capital. It really is around how to support business for the core purpose of their operating, right?
Yeah, right. So, and I mean, I guess most people immediately assume that if you're a SME lender, or if you're a borrower who needs to go an SME lender, a specialist SME lender like you guys, that I'm going to pay through the nose in terms of interest rates. How do you pitch your rates?
Rates for us, and which is where they need to be. It's priced for risk, right? So the higher the risk, the higher the rate. But we don't ever push into that sort of equity risk. We don't see that as an area we pursue. And the lower the risk, the more secured it is. Then and secured by means of bricks and mortar security, property, but it could be balance sheet as well. Lending against the debtors or lending against the stock in the balance sheet as well. That will bring that down. So really just pricing it. We see ourselves sort of arguably where the banks are, but slightly outside of there where the banks have sort of missed those opportunities of good, solid businesses that need the support of an SME specialist bank to be able to support them through their growth phase.
And if I was to ask you, George, what is the difference between, and I don't need you to bag anyone, but what is the difference between Judo Bank and, say, one of the big four more recognised business banks? I mean, is it your approach or what is it? I mean, your interest rates are sort of around the same. You both price a risk. You both want to have happy business customers. I get all that. You both have big balance sheets, so you can lend as much as somebody really needs. What's the difference? What would you say?
Yeah, look, we think, you think about where the banking sector has gone over the last decade or two. It's become highly commoditised, industrialised, where we're bringing back sort of relationship banking, as I mentioned earlier. So we try to, as I said earlier, arming bankers with the ability to use discretion, to use their judgment, to understand good solid business, and be able to support them through the phase they're in and help them grow into that. So I think first and foremost, Judo's model is around getting to know the customer and the broker, for that matter, and building deep relationships with them. In particular, more recently, and I think it's been quite critical over the last 18 months. For us, we've sort of expanded as well over the last 12 to 18 months. We're in 12 locations nationally, and sort of allows us to reach and assist a greater number of customers now, right? So getting in front of more customers to provide them more of those solutions, and not be a policy-driven lender, and making sure bankers have got that skill set to be able to support them.
You made a very interesting point about discretion. Generally speaking, most of the banking industry today is driven by policy and policy alone, and therefore, hardly any deals fit into a square box. I mean, they're all got their individual vagaries that you have to sort of work around, particularly when it comes to small SMEs. How I remember when I first talked to you and Joseph in particular many years ago, I seem to recall there was like a 5-day or a 10-day period of which you'll get an answer. Is that still existing? Do you still operate that way?
Yeah, we do. We scale that, it's around making fast decisions, right? Some businesses need it in 5 days, some don't. Some need more time to sort of work through what those solutions are. But largely it's around now making fast decisions with an empowered banker to be able to sort of support the client and what they're looking for. And I think what's most important, I think, for clients is the value of relationships, right? We lose sight of that, and I think being accessible, as I said earlier, and understanding their business is so critical to be able to provide that level of support.
Because the worst thing that I can't stand is the deal goes to Joe, and Joe's my relationship guy, and he says, "Oh, it looks like a good deal. I'm going to recommend it, but it's going to go up to some credit committee who I don't know who they are, and then I'm going to get bounced, and it takes like 3 weeks to get there." Do you guys operate differently to that? When you say empowered, do you give decision-making empowerment to the relationship person?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the relationship banker. They're supported by our risk executives as well, and it's about making quick decisions. When you've got that ability to understand the transaction in front of you, you're able to make quick decisions. I think in that report that I mentioned earlier, the SME Insights report, what came out is that 1 in 4 SMEs were being knocked back from accessing new funding. That's stifling their plans for investment, hiring staff, and growth, right? So it's really just providing that level of support back into the SME community to be able to get the access they so dearly need. The report also came out and showed that there's significant delays in accessing funding as well. So I think it takes, on average, 42 days, Mark, for a loan to be discharged.
Wow.
And that's crazy. When you link that back to plans for growth and plans for a business and what plans they're making, particularly times like now coming out of COVID, they really need that level of certainty. And I think that's incredibly disappointing that we've gotten to this point where we've got an average of 42 days for a loan to be discharged. And if you think about the SME community, that is the engine room for the Australian economy, right? Their investment in growth is critical to our sort of economic recovery. And it's really important for us to start thinking more about these things, and why, to your point, why judo exists. Since the start of the pandemic, that's been 18 months or so, a bit longer, judo has been the fourth largest business lender in actual dollar terms. And we've provided in excess of $2 billion in vital funding to the Australian business community. And you can see that in the latest APRA figures.
So that's interesting. And George, just I think we need to ask this just quickly. Two things I want to ask you from a broker's point of view. What's your lowest level that you lend, and what's the upper limit? In other words, there's no point me coming to you for $100 grand loan. So what's your lower level and what's your upper level?
Oh, look, with where we're at in the market at the moment, it's 250 plus. Into that SME market, which we sort of deem to be up to around 20 million in sort of lending, or 100 million in turnover, right? That's
right.
Sort of rough numbers, but give or take. So that's where we've always made sure we've kept a little bit of flex to be able to support the SME community to fill that void, and where that opportunity is.
And then if I'm a broker, where can I get my hands on that SME Insights? And is that something the Judo commissioned? Is that your own report, or is that a report that's out there generally? Because if I'm a broker, I should be reading that so I can talk to my client about what's going on in your industry as a lender to SMEs. How do I get my hands on that?
Yeah, great. Look, we partnered with Eastern Partners, and that report is up on our website at the moment, so they can get access to that report.
And where, judo.com.au?
Judo.com.au, yes.
Yep. Right.
And you'll see there that it's half of Australian SMEs was in this period, Mark, are still seeking to grow their business, hiring more staff, and investing in expansion. And this is despite all the uncertainty over the pandemic and the prolonged lockdown. So it's much needed access to the SME community, and that's where we sort of step in, and we're trying to help that SME community.
So they can get it on your website, because I think if you're a broker, you need to understand what's going on in industry. And I want to thank George Abid. I want to thank everybody in your organisation and all the generosity of people like Joseph Healy, etc., that have given our industry. To everybody who's listening, if you're a broker, this organisation, I think, is the only dedicated SME bank in the country that I know about. There may be plenty talking about it, but these guys are up and running. They have the capital. They're doing loans every day. They're in the top 5 in terms of business lending, not by number of transactions, but by volume of dollars in the last 12 months, particularly the last 12 months. So, and I know these guys. There's someone I would commend to you. Certainly have them on your wish list if you've got a client who needs to get a business loan. George Abid, thanks very much. Appreciate it, mate. And I hope every single broker who has an SME client walks in their door who wants to borrow money, make sure that they consider your organisation, judobank.com.au, judo.com.au. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Thanks, Mark.
All the best, George.